My name is Shruti Chawla,
Rachel Buck,
Sarah Bellows Blakely, and Asona Louie.
And we would like to present I Caught You While You Were Napping, Quantrill's Raid on the Kansas Frontier.
Suddenly, I heard hoofbeats. Lewis ran inside the house trying to escape, but Quantrill's raiders chased him back outside again, mortally wounded. Covering his body with mine, I begged for mercy, but one of the ruffians lifted out my arm and shot my husband in the head. I could see the bullet enter, and I felt his body go limp.
The story of Mrs. Lewis Carpenter is only one example of the brutality inflicted upon the Free State men of Lawrence, Kansas on August 21st, 1863 during Quantrill's raid.
Quantrill's raid on Lawrence, Kansas was a tragedy at the heart of the frontier war for freedom. Two distinct groups of people explored social, political, moral, and economic frontiers on the border between Kansas and Missouri, making this a civil rights struggle of unparalleled intensity.
But the essential frontier was freedom itself.
Kansans who fought for freedom from slavery and Missourians who fought for freedom to preserve their way of life were locked in a battle that grew during the Civil War and culminated in Quantrill's raid, leaving deep scars of division that linger to this day.
Freedom is the legacy of Quantrill's raid, but this frontier is marred by continued struggle as Americans work to determine what freedom means for all people.
My people have cared about freedom ever since the beginning of American slavery. Now, the Underground Railroad brought me to this place called Lawrence. I didn't rightly know nothing about this town, but what everybody told me was that if I got there, I'd be free.
Completely repealing the Missouri Compromise, the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854 opened two huge territories for settlement. Many thought that Kansas would be a slave state, and the nation's struggle over slavery began here.
Sarah Robinson, a member of the New England Immigrant Aid Company, was active in the abolitionist immigration to Lawrence that so angered William Clark Quantrill.
For Southern congressmen, Kansas was simply a matter of survival. However, legislators in the North intended no further compromise with slavery. Led by Senator David Atchison, Missourians poured into Kansas, intending to maintain their peculiar institution. My husband, Charles Robinson, and other men associated with the New England Immigrant Aid Company led Free Staters to Kansas.
Other influential Free Staters included John Brown, Reverend Richard Cordley, and Senator Jim Lane.
We must remember that day of infamy in March of 1855 when those Missouri scoundrels foisted upon us their bogus legislature. We fought back with the Topeka Constitution of 1855 that outlawed slavery in our fair state. Then they hit us with the Sack of Wars, the detestable pro-slave Lecompton Constitution, and the Merit-Scene Massacre. To bring freedom to Kansas, we must rid the state of these pro-slave scum once and for all.
I watched violence build and build until 1861, when Kansas was admitted to the Union and the Civil War began.
Missourians were frequently raided by Union bands, such as Jennison's Jayhawkers.
When would the angry border ruffians retaliate?
William Clark Quantrill, a schoolteacher from Ohio, came to Kansas with a Free State family. Always an opportunist, Quantrill's sympathies for the Free State cause were easily shifted to the pro-slavery side.
Quantrill joined the Confederate Army and became infamous throughout Missouri and Kansas for his bloody raids against Free Staters.
Everybody knew Quantrill hated Lawrence, but there was more to it than that. He was mad as a hornet about Gettysburg, and then there was a collapse of a jail in Kansas City. It was full of lady relatives of Quantrill's band. Quantrill figured it was time for vengeance.
Lawrence had received warnings of a raid, but after 3 months of unmet expectations, the town was caught off guard.
When asked why he did not attack sooner, Quantrill was reported to have said,
"You were expecting me then, but I caught you while you were napping."
On August 21st, 1863, the band of guerrillas slipped into the edge of town around 5 in the morning.
Then ruffians attacked at Quantrill's command, rushed on the town. Mrs. Edward Fitch, Mrs. Ralph Dix, and Mrs. George Bell tell their stories.
Edwin and I heard the trampling of the horses' feet, and somehow we knew it was danger.
We could hear the raiders coming in the distance. Ralph hurried inside the house.
George and his companion were trying to warn the other townspeople. Suddenly, they found themselves in the midst of guerrillas everywhere.
All at once, 20 or 30 of them surrounded the house, and in an instant, a ruffian, a demon, burst open the door. Oh, that face that haunts me night and day.
He quickly emerged, carrying a rifle and money. But in his absence, the raiders, two men who looked as though they had no souls, had arrived and caught him off guard.
George recognized one of the raiders as a friend. My husband was momentarily relieved, thinking that his life would be spared.
That wretch turned and saw my Edward, so calm, so self-possessed, and without a word the deadly aim was taken. Shot after shot in rapid succession, emptying his revolver.
And as they aimed their guns, Ralph raised his clenched fist and said, "Take the money, I can always earn it back. But please, spare my life, because life is sweet and cannot be regained."
As soon as George faced the raiders, he knew that the end was near. My husband asked for a moment to pray. The second he said amen, the shots rang out, and my husband fell dead.
As they set fire to our home, I pleaded, and 3 times I attempted to remove my husband's body, but those cruel men wouldn't let me.
The second the money transferred from my husband's hands to one of the raiders, another man drew a small pistol from behind his back, converting my video.
Not satisfied with killing my husband, the devils climbed Mount Oriak towards my home at the top. I opened the door and looked into the face of George's friend, a man who had sat at my table. He stared me in the eye and callously said, "We have killed your husband, and now we are going to burn his home."
I took my screaming children across the road, and we threw ourselves upon the ground. You watched the work of death and desolation go on and on.
In that one moment that lives forever in my mind, I heard the deafening sound that symbolized my life, as forever being filled with sorrow and hate.
Quantrill killed over 150 men and boys, but that just counts the white folk. What people choose to forget is that Quantrill headed first for the target he hated the most, the black folk living in lawns. I was hiding in the cornfield where I could just barely see the riders as they trampled the tents. My brother, a member of the 1st Kansas Colored Regiment, was sleeping, unaware he was about to die. My ears rang with rifle shots as they riddled the tent, and in a few horrible moments, all that was left was canvas, stained with blood, and the lifeless form of my brother. He was all I had. The rest of my family was lost deep in the South. I was left alone, clinging to freedom, but with nobody to help me rebuild.
Lawrence was demolished. Despite their misery, their survivors began to bury the dead. Many women returned to the east, and without husbands or homes, they thought it was best to just leave and forget.
Order number 11 forced us Missourians out of the county surrounding Quantrill's pattern in western Missouri.
Yes.
General Thomas Ewing seemed mighty unconcerned about our rights and freedom.
The reactions of Missourians to this harsh decree cannot be overlooked.
Ewing's men spared nothing. We were forced to leave our homes.
Many of our good Missourimen were beaten, even killed.
Today, many Southerners still refer to the Civil War as the War of Northern Aggression. In South Carolina and Mississippi, the use and meaning of the Confederate flag is still a controversial issue.
Today, the descendants of Quantrill's band hold reunions to commemorate the raid, just as their ancestors did.
Among those ancestors were the James brothers. In 1995, Jesse James was reburied in a closed casket, draped in a Confederate flag. A crowd of 600 attended the funeral, which featured an honor guard of a dozen men in Confederate uniforms. This was just 6 years ago.
Today, Lawrence celebrates its past and commemorates its role in the struggle for freedom.
Quantrill's raid inspired the people of Kansas to fight on, a war in which black Kansans enlisted in proportionally greater numbers than from any other state.
The struggle that led to Kansas statehood took place on several frontiers. It was first a moral and economic frontier.
Because the settlements of Kansas Territory epitomized the nation's moral turmoil over the issues of slavery and the economic questions of free labor versus slave labor in the expanding territories.
Popular sovereignty created the political frontier.
It placed the powder keg of political decisions squarely on the border between Kansas and Missouri.
Missourians and Kansans battled across their border over the freedom so cherished by each side. The eruption of the Civil War gave William Clark Quantrill the opportunity to enact vengeance on the frontier of the struggle between abolitionists and pro-slavery forces.
Many days you have lingered around my cabin door. Oh, hard times come again no more.
They had no guns. They couldn't fight. They had wives, mothers, and children, but the ruffians refused to spare their lives. In a frontier town known as Lawrence, Kansas, their fate was sealed. The fires that burned in Quantrill's reign have yet to be extinguished, as people on both sides of the border remember the freedoms at the heart of the frontier.
Oh, hard times come again no more.